Hey everyone, it's Jeff. I just wanted to mention about this episode really quick. During the recording of this episode, I was admittedly going through some pretty heavy stuff in my personal life. So there's a lot of edits and whatnot throughout this episode to cut out some of the ums and the uhs and the pauses while I was trying to get my head right. And during all of that, I forgot to press record on our audio recorder. So the audio you're hearing is the backup from the internet. It's not as high quality as it usually is, but I did my best trying to put it together. I think you're still going to enjoy the episode, so please still listen. Just wanted to give you a heads up. All right, enjoy.
This is Headspace.
All right, welcome everybody to Headspace on My Mama Done Told Me. My name's Jeff. I'm here, as always, with my mom, Kathy. Hi, Ma.
Hi, hon. How are you?
I'm doing well. This is a new one for us.
Yes,
this is the recording-wise. This is the first time that we have gone off-site and recorded an episode. Lauren wanted to be here tonight. She has a concert tonight, so she is not with us. But we brought someone else with us. Or in fact, we borrowed some space from a gentleman. Brad Mock. Hello, Brad.
What's up, guys?
Hey.
How are you, sir?
Good. How are you?
Good. Brad, you are an ordained minister.
I am.
Minister.
That's my gig. That's
Mr.
what
Minister.
I do. Yeah.
The director of high school ministry, aka you are a high school youth pastor, correct?
Yeah.
You work at a large local church here in Omaha, Nebraska. I don't know if we can say names of things. I don't want to associate anything with anything. So you can always look up Brad if you are really interested in where he's working. You're also someone who I consider to be a friend. So thank you so much for having us here. Welcome to Headspace, and My Mama Done Told Me. And again, thanks for having us here in your office, your newly renovated office.
Dude,
Yep.
you guys are some of the first visitors here, so welcome.
Love that.
The students haven't smelled it up yet, so it's still safe in here.
We're enjoying the curing paint on the walls.
Yeah, make sure not to hang anything on the walls before that paint cures.
30
Or
days.
I know a guy who will get real upset with you if you do that. So full disclosure, Brad and I used to work together. I used to work here at the church in the maintenance and security world. So that's how I know Brad. When I first got out of the military, this was my first job out of the military, which I consider to be a real blessing. I mean, It was exactly what I needed getting out of the military, out of a more rigid environment into, this world. And it kind of truthfully got me not only the flexibility to do the schooling that I was doing at the time, but experience in the world that I'm still working in, which is security and facilities management. But that's how I know you.
Yeah, that's cool. We miss you around here, man. It's good to have you back.
Thank you. I actually ran into my old boss the other day at the grocery store, and he's like, "You're still the standard when we talk about how things should be done around here." And I said, "I don't know if I believe that, but thank you."
I believe it.
Yeah,
I do.
No way.
Yes, I do.
No way.
Spoken like a mom.
Spoken like a true mother, right? So, Mom, you and I, we have a relationship with this church as well.
Yes.
It goes back even further than Brad and I's relationship.
Yes.
This was one of the you fill this in. Was this one of the first kind of churches that you got into around this?
Yes.
Or
church
Oop.
at that. Oops. Are we not supposed to say it?
I think it's okay, but I don't know.
Okay.
I don't. It's fine on my end.
Yeah.
Well, this is a good thing. I mean, everybody should know this. The pastor that was here then, that's when I became a Christian. I heard the gospel for the very first time sitting at this church. And then I brought the kids back to go to Awana and all that kind of thing. So we grew here spiritually, and I met my future husband here. And so
very cool.
A lot.
Yep. So this new segment that we're doing for our podcast, as I said, it's called Headspace. this is the first time we've recorded one of these particular episodes. So kind of the thought behind this segment is for us to be able to sit with people that we consider to be experts. I don't know how you feel about that title, Brad.
You're the only one who thinks that about me, so I appreciate the encouragement's great.
Yeah.
I've been doing it a while, so I better be decent at it at least by now. So.
Right. Well, I've seen you work. You've done some wonderful things in my family, and in some times that we really needed you. So that to me is huge. I have some of my own thoughts on religion and Christianity and things like that, but I think I want to start off a little by getting to know you just a little bit better. So, did I tell people what we're doing, or did I go off topic? I may have gone off topic a little bit
with what the Headspace segment
right?
is.
Yeah. Okay. So Headspace, we're going to sit down with experts. We're going to sort of get into the world of what exactly they do, why they do it, how they do it, mindset's gonna breaking things.
Yeah, I am. Sorry.
That's unfixable. That's $1,000 desk that we'll never get back.
Try not to make any noise. Sorry.
You're like breaking it and like throwing things
Oops.
around.
I was playing what I was
So, but anyway, so we're the hope is, with the name Headspace, let's get into the head of people that are in maybe difficult or things that, professions or things that require you to be in a certain mindset. Let's just dig into some of the things that people do and why it's important and what our minds and our hearts and all that have to do in that world, and leave it kind of open to interpretation, with a focus a little bit on where's your mind, where and all that.
Where is your mind?
Yeah. So Brad, as a youth myself, still, of course, at 40 years old, I'm a youth. Growing up in the church, youth pastors, right? They were the cool pastors. It seemed like to us growing up, you always kind of just got to have fun, because that's what we see as the youth, right? You see maybe a goofy pastor that comes up on stage, or he's the cool one that gets the pie in the face at the retreat or whatever that may be. Now, as an adult, though, I see that and I go, that isn't all there is to it at all. And I'm definitely interested in what about this was so appealing to you. And I'll let you answer that. I talk a lot. So
he does.
Yeah.
You have to kind of.
Thanks, Ma.
Sometimes
She can't say everything you do is perfect.
She could. Might not be true, but I know that there's so much more to that. It's not just get up there, be goofy, throw the football across the room and, make the facilities team super mad because we brought a wood chipper into the building or whatever it may be, right? You have personally, within the last several months, been available for me and my family during one of the scariest times of my life, which, like I said, I can't thank you enough for that. But this is the scary and difficult side of being a youth pastor, are those things that not everyone sees or thinks about when they think goofball at the retreat, right? So why get into this world? Like, just take us back to young man Brad, and I'm assuming seminary. Is that how it works?
Bible college, not
Bible
seminary.
College. Okay.
Seminary's at like master's degree level.
Okay.
Really stuff. Didn't go there.
Yeah.
As a youth pastor, you don't have to. So that's one of the benefits of it.
Okay.
But yeah, I kind of joke about the stereotype. Like, I'm secure enough in the job that I have.
Uh-huh.
And I'm 45. I've been doing this since I was 21.
Mm-hmm.
And I just embrace like the stereotypes of like, oh, you just drink Mountain Dew and get up on stage and hang out with kids all day,
Right.
Yeah,
and
bro.
you work like 3 hours a week on Sundays, and then you just play video games there. And you just have to laugh about that.
Right.
Because even today, as Jeff and I were talking, I'm like, I got my youth pastor garb on. He's like, let me guess, shorts and flip-flops, and it's like, yeah, we're just such a casual job because you're hanging out with students, you're not going to wear a suit to work for that.
Not if you want to be taken seriously.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, for a kid, you might have to wear that for an adult if you want to be taken seriously, but you're dealing with people that it does matter that you don't walk in looking like a stiff.
Yep. And you don't want to be them either. You know, if I
No.
come in as a 45-year-old dude, like trying to like say all the words they're saying and the phrases, they're just going to see right through that, you know, because teens, like, they want something real, right?
I can
Absolutely.
say poser.
Yep. So you just try to embrace that. But yeah, jumping back to like my high school years, my family grew up going to church. My parents were great parents and brought me up in the faith, but my youth pastor came alongside of that and kind of supplemented what they were doing in my life. He took me out a couple times. I mean, I remember like the couple times that he would like take me out to eat, and the specific questions he asked me about life that just kind of rocked my world and put me, like, just one question put me in a new direction. And just thinking, as I remember being my senior year, almost the end of my senior year, what am I going to do? And I think just the impact that he was able to have in my life just kind of kept coming back to that. And it's like, man, what if I could have that same impact in a young person's life?
Yeah.
You know, they're just at this crucial age where they're just trying to figure out who they are and what's life about. And man, what a privilege it is to get to speak into their lives during those years when they're just trying to figure that out, you know?
So as a younger parent, I should say, or a newer, I shouldn't say younger, as a newer parent, and maybe it's just my stage of life and everything that's going on in my life right now and in my family right now. But when you say things like being able to be influential to kids in a pivotal time in your life, I could see how at one point that would have sounded appealing to me. When I hear that now, it sort of terrifies me.
Yeah.
Because I think, and I go, how am I ever going to make any sort of an impact or a positive influence? And now I say that and I go, I know that just being a decent role model and being able to be there. I mean, showing up. I talk to my therapist about that all the time. You show up.
Yep.
And a lot of times that's enough. And you do the best you can. And I would imagine that anyone sitting in here would say, you know, that's the best you can do because it's the best you can. But if someone said to me right now, Jeff, would you be interested in being, you know, not just for your own kids, but for which you have 4 beautiful children, but also be an impactful, what's the right word, to be a leader in the world of their development, whether they choose spirituality or in Christianity or not, you're still is there something to that I mean, can you speak to that at all? Like the appeal of that, is that still appealing to you? Is that, I mean, just speak to that however you want. Don't let me over explain things, because that's what I do.
Yeah, no, I mean, I just have always had like a special place in my heart for like the next generation. When I go to the mall and you see like a group of teenagers hanging out, I think the average adult is kind of like, those teenagers are being loud, they're being annoying, they're going to get kicked out of the store or whatever. And like, I see those kids and I'm just like, I just have a heart for them, you know, and I'm just like, want people to understand them or care about them, or like, cause I think it's good for us to all remember back to what kind of idiots we were probably during our teenage years. Right. And the things we did. And then we kind of get away from that. And we just look at them with like, I don't understand them. I don't get them. And I still don't. There's times where I'm like, what the heck are they talking about? Is this even English? You know, all the lingo they're using and stuff. But like, I still, I don't know that I need to know
riz,
that.
Bruh.
Yeah, dude, I don't have any riz, but, you know, we were talking earlier, like, you don't know what movies necessarily, or like who's famous or what. I don't even know that I know that, but I do know that I can show students that I care about them without knowing all those things. And I do kind of know what's going on in their culture in general, even if I don't know the specifics, to kind of enter into that world and care for them in that. And so I've just always enjoyed that, you know?
Yeah.
That's
and
good.
and you do it with a very, and not just you, a lot of youth pastors. I mean, I know there's a, like you said, there's a stereotype of the youth pastor and all that. And there's really nothing wrong with that. The cool dad at the thing that people also kind of think is a nerd, but wants to, you know, but they know that he's there. I think that was the part about growing up in youth group that was probably the most appealing to me. It was not just like, oh, that's probably a cool job. You get to hang out with kids like me all day. Oh, that must be wonderful. But knowing like every week when we come here, he's there, and I don't really like it when he's not.
Yeah.
Because it feels weird. It feels like so I wasn't really going anywhere with that, but
So I guess I would ask the question, your goal then with the kids is to have them feel accepted and have them feel cared about. Is that the main goal of a youth pastor? What is the main goal of a youth pastor?
Yeah, great question. Well, obviously there's the spiritual side that kind of comes in first. But that identity that you're talking about and figuring out who they are like falls really closely under that, So around here we use language. We're trying to make disciples. A disciple is just a follower, somebody who looks like the person they're following. And ultimately, of course, because we're a church, that's Jesus who we're ultimately pointing to. And we try to help students say, we try to get out of the way as their leaders and say, hey, don't follow us because we're imperfect. Look past us to Jesus and be like him, because the way he lived, how he treated people, what he valued, all that is like the best way to live your life. And so we try to help them see that that's the way. But yeah, along the way, a lot of times it's, man, they broke up with their boyfriend or girlfriend, or they're arguing with their parents, or they're not doing well in school, and they're just figuring out who I am. And we're just trying to help them understand some of those things. Yeah. They're key.
You mentioned trying to figure out who they are in the world and how to treat people and all of that. And I know there's a lot of people in the world that view Christianity, and especially kids that are either in high school or just out of high school, that view it as people that are very judgmental and very and not accepting of what all is going on. And there's the complexities of things like gender and sexuality and politics and religion, of course. And I'm sure it's a different game now, or a different, not game, but a different, environment in the world now than it was when you started, when you were 21, even with the rise of social media and things like that. I saw I don't know if either of you watched any of the Olympics, but there was probably in my opinion, being myself generally a more liberal leaning person, but I saw what I consider to be one of the most impressive church or religion or Christian commercials I don't know if you guys saw it. It was like, this is us. And then the us was the US and Jesus and whatever. And it was like just taking you to a website, but it showed like people from all different walks of life and people that were clearly like struggling and that had maybe a drug problem, or people that were working the streets and things like that. And it said like, this is us and like, this is Jesus. And I was like, okay, finally we're seeing some acceptance in who the type of people Jesus would be hanging out with, and the types of things that, and not to say that we want as for a youth pastor, we would necessarily want to say, yeah, go, find the crackhead in the alley and hang out with them, because that might not be the appropriate time for a youth to go do that. But as they grow up into adults and all of that, just having, it's just a way to view the world that I think is more Christ-like than a lot of what, maybe the more traditional or the more, or some of the, I don't know the right words here, but what some of the stereotypes or the initial thoughts are of what it means to be a Christian. And then as a youth, when you see those things, and when your very identity is to be accepting of everything, no matter what it is, then to see a group that feels like, whether they're truly preaching it or not, feels like they're saying only if you fit in this, that can be really confusing, I think. So with that being said, I could see that being maybe a difficult thing to talk about with youth. And I'm just wondering whether it's that or not, what are some of the hardest things that you think young people are struggling with right now in your years of doing what you're doing, and I'd like to kind of, it's sort of a multi-part question, but how have those things changed and evolved, and the immediate access to the internet and the world and all of the things that I didn't even have growing up, let alone mom. And, as things progress even further, where do we see that going? Loaded question, a lot of stuff I just said, but
that's for sure.
But I just, and you don't have to answer it or in any certain order. I'd like to maybe talk about that a little.
Yeah, cool. I'll talk about kind of that first part. What you're talking about is I'm guessing your listeners are all over different places of what they believe about faith. And when I talk about Jesus, they're like, they may be like,
there may
awesome,
be some people that
like,
turn this off. I mean, and that's fine.
Yeah. And I think though, that's why when I said, hey, our goal is to point our students to him more so than like the teachings of our church and all those are important, whatever, like, cause we mess up, we're fallible, even me as a youth pastor. And it's like, man, to point, I don't know a lot of people who've really looked into Jesus that are like, that guy was a terrible guy. You know what I mean? And so, I just think we can do a lot of great things if we're pointing towards him. But yeah, talking about culture stuff, over 25 years almost of seeing youth culture change has been interesting. The latest stats that we're seeing are some of the social, there's some things to celebrate in youth culture, like some of the social things that students would get into that we would say cause a lot of pain for them, teen pregnancies and drinking and drug use and stuff that becomes addictive behaviors and things. A lot of those kind of social things are down.
Oh, okay.
In numbers.
That surprises me for some reason. I mean, I don't look at those numbers. So
yeah, it's not like students aren't doing those things, but I think it's this device right here that's changing how they interact with their peers. And so they're more interacting over here. Again, I have teenagers, they want to hang out with their friends all the time, right? But I think even less than they used to. They're on their phone more, with people less. And so there's just not as much opportunity to do that stuff.
Lauren was just talking about that yesterday, about how her stepchildren, they don't really have friends, physical friends. They have tons of friends that they text with or that they, interact
through
with
various platforms.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I think you're right on with that.
Interesting.
Yeah. I was just at this training downtown a couple months ago, and this lady, kind of a world-renowned expert on teens and stuff, was talking, and she was giving stats of how those things were going down. I forget the year, but then all of a sudden these other things started to increase in students' lives, depression and anxiety and loneliness and all that. And she asked this room of like 300 of us or whatever. She's like, do you know what happened at this year? I forget if it's 2012 or whatever. And she's like, that's when the iPhone came out. And I don't think we can blame all the world's problems on the iPhone, right? Us old people
but
maybe try to do
some.
that. Yes, we can. And it was to that year where those things started to increase, and the impacts of what this device has done for community and loneliness and relationships has been pretty significant. So when we're working with students, that's more what we're working with them through now, is like, hey, can we help you find counseling for those things or whatever, more so than like you're addicted to drugs or whatever. Right. So,
and it can't, the answer can't be to just get rid of that. You know, we, as parents, sometimes we get a lot of feedback that it's like, well, just take away the phone. Well, first of all, dealing with a teenager at all, the word just doesn't really fit in anywhere because nothing's that easy. Nothing's just do this and then it'll be fixed, at least not in my experience. So the world is so connected to these devices, and not just the device itself, the access to the network that it's all on. I mean, I'm sitting in this room and there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, at least 7 or 8 different things that I could literally access anything that I wanted. Can you imagine that, 70 years ago or 100 years ago or anything like that? It was unthinkable. So the way that progresses, but because of that being so there, for lack of a better term, it almost becomes the life, like the battery almost, where if you were to take that away just without anything, it would be world shattering. I don't know what to compare that. I don't think there's anything like that to compare it to in previous generations. That we're getting to a point in parenting, I think, or in the world that I don't, and you, if you have a thought.
My thought is that I don't think you can pull it away, but I still think there can be limits. And I still think a family can say, you know, we're going to have X amount of time with no screen time.
Sure.
But not take it totally away. But I do still think it shouldn't be open freedom to as much screen time or phone time or whatever.
Right.
That can't be healthy. And I know that there's a lot of, and it isn't because of the rise in anxiety and depression and loneliness and isolation and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And I think we've dropped the ball by allowing it to be so pervasive.
Right. Yeah. I don't disagree with that either. I miss the days. I mean, I can't raise my hand and say that I don't have an addiction to it. You know, I don't think that it's as all encompassing as some people's, but I'm not going to say that my life would be a lot different, but that's also because the world is now being built around, you know, the social networks and all that for kids. And I'm sure you see that, Brad. I mean, is it possible for you to do a sermon on Sunday and people aren't on their phones? I mean, I don't know what your guys' rules are and all that, but I would imagine it would be pretty difficult.
Some of the kids have their Bible on the phone.
Right.
That's where I have mine.
Yeah. I always know when they get them held sideways that they're playing a game, they're gaming, you know? So it's like, I do know that trick, but you're not holding your Bible's app sideways. I know that. Yeah.
So, to kind of get back to, and so that's part of our world now. I guess it was my whole point is that's part of our world. It's part of school. It's part of education. It's part of your job. You know, there's very few even jobs you can have now where you don't have to basically have your device on you to do your job. I mean, obviously if you're not just doing, but if you're working, you know, retail or something like that, you might not need it as much, but it might be part of the, you know, scan the thing and look it up on the inventory and all that. So it's there. It's not going anywhere.
Right.
And my fear is, and I'm sure I'm not the only one that feels this, but as that continues to progress, quote unquote, if it's progression, the technology gets more advanced and all of that, it becomes even more accessible and there's more things out there, there's more danger, and it'd be even harder to pull any of that away. And if we're already seeing loneliness and isolation and depression and anxiety going in the direction that we don't want it to go, what happens there? Well, how do you know, I hate to say the word, but because it's a trigger word for a lot of people or whatever, but with suicide, you know, I don't know the stats. Maybe you've seen them, but has that gone up? Has teen suicide gone up? Maybe. And I would imagine it does. I don't want to misquote that, but I would imagine it has. And that's my fear as a parent. It's my biggest fear that something like that would happen. I guess to bring this back to Brad, you've been quiet and I'm so sorry. This is pretty on par for what.
Well, you've got some things on your heart that they're leaking out.
Yeah. Our church has a really strong counseling ministry. We kind of keep, it's even in a separate building from our church. We kind of keep it separate so that folks don't have to, if they don't have a thing, you know, if they have something against church or whatever, it's kind of a neutral location we try to be. And I talk to those counselors and they're like, anybody who's dealing with anxiety, depression, whatever, like the first thing I ask them is show me your screen time, you know, and how much are you on social media? And they're like almost without fail. It's almost 100% that person is like spending significant amount of time on this device that's leading to that. And so one of their first pieces of advice is like, okay, how are you going to pull that back a little bit and get to more of a healthy place? So when you're talking about, man, how do we not take these away from students completely? Because that's just not realistic. But how do we help them have some controls and learn how to have this thing without it overtaking them?
Yeah, to set it down and focus on something else for a while.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And I think to people my age, our generation and whatnot, it's a little bit of an unusual thing because we started our youth without any of that. And then by the time we were, you know, becoming adults, that stuff existed. Maybe not to the extent that it is now, but we had computers that had constant internet access and all of that. So it's a little bit of a unique, I guess, perspective on things where I could be okay with setting my phone down all day and being out at the lake or being, working out in the yard or going on my motorcycle for a ride or something like that and not feel like I'm missing out, and that I think is a lot of what drives this is, the tag or the whatever is FOMO, fear of missing out. And, if I'm not checking all the time, then I'm going to not know what's going on, and I'm going to fall behind, and it becomes almost this compulsion to be there. And if we can find a way to work with and show and coach, as opposed to just taking
Right.
of why it's beneficial, how it feels. My fear, though, is that kids aren't going to necessarily have the
Self-control
well, maybe not
to do it themselves.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure that, but also like what happens in your brain being outside, doing those things. Those are, you get serotonin, you get dopamine, you get adrenaline and all those things because you're doing things in nature, but it's not as immediate and constant as it is here in these devices. So when you've gotten used to the injection into your leg, into your
the
brain,
immediate gratification
every time, well, then it starts to feel harder to get that elsewhere. And I'm not a psychologist or I'm not a neuroscientist where I can figure out how to do those things, but I think I would have to imagine that needs to be probably the next thing we need to figure out.
So do you struggle a lot with that with the kids, do you think?
Sure. When they're together, I'll joke with them too. You'll walk up to a group of them and they're all like this, and some of it they're interacting together where they're like, hey, look at this picture. And they're texting and they're interacting with their
each
phones.
other in a group.
Yes. But other times you'll walk up to 5 or 6 of them and they're all in a circle, but they're not interacting at all on that. And so by the time they get to high school around here, we try not to have too many rules because you're right. We're trying to teach them at that point how to have this device and be a normal human being.
Right.
I think our middle schoolers probably have a little stricter policy around here around that. We do have, when we get to our small groups, kids should not be on their phones at all. But large group, we kind of trust them to do that. When we go away for a week-long trip or something, we say, hey, just use this as a camera and try not to be on it, And students love that week. But as soon as we get back in the airport with Wi-Fi, they're all just back to it,
right?
Yeah.
So, but you got them away from it for a while, and they experienced that. And I think that's really good. They didn't go; their brains didn't melt.
That's right.
They were fine.
Yeah.
Actually, they probably had more fun than they've had in a long time in a different way.
I think you're right. So you hope to present the better option to them, and that they'd be
that's a
continue
great
to be
thing,
drawn to that.
Yeah, because it's sometimes hard to get that in your own home environment because the kids don't take that instruction very well from their parents as far as we really don't want you to be on the device that much. And there's I'm just gonna
we're getting into parenting here a little bit. But for us, we started trying to talk about things with our kids way before they would happen, and when my 3-year-old was throwing a temper tantrum, I don't know, somehow I thought in my mind, I guess because I work with teenagers, I'm like, what's this same thing going to look like when they're 17 years old? It's going to be a lot more difficult to manage. And so we started talking to them early and just setting up some things of how we would do dinner time, for example. And my wife and I know our kid, we don't have the cell phone there, and just different things like that. Yeah. If you wait till the heat of the moment with students, it's really hard to retrain them. Exactly. They're not completely untrainable.
Right.
But, the younger you can kind of start forming some of that in them. That's why I think parents, we always say in our youth ministry, parents are the number one influence by far on their kids' lives. We can come alongside.
Yes.
But that parenting is really where 90% of the work gets done.
Right. And, the things that we've already talked about with, all the social pressures and the complexities of, gender and all of that, and the access to harmful things and situations and all of that. These are things, since we're talking about parenting, these are things that aren't only difficult for the kids, difficult for the parents.
Yeah.
And their loved ones to understand and learn how to parent through those things. I know this because I'm trying to do it. And you've probably had countless conversations, I would guess, with young people and their parents. So you're a pastor, you get to speak the word of God, but that also means that you're a little bit of a counselor too. You're a lifeline for a lot of people. And I can't imagine, I know this because I know you well enough to know that you don't go there and just go, good luck, see you at church on Sunday.
Yeah.
Not to say you're going to have all the answers, but speak to that maybe a little.
Yeah. Some of the things that I think are helpful for parents, one comes to my mind is just reminding them that they're normal, that what they're going through with their teenager, you're not the only, like when you're going through that as a parent, you just feel like,
Island.
dude, I'm in it. Yeah. Island is a great term. And it's just like when we get parents together, and we just say, hey, sit at this table and just talk about what's going great in parenting and what's driving you nuts in parenting. Mm-hmm. And they're just like, wow, you're dealing with that too. And I just think that's so encouraging to know, like, oh, my experience is normal, I think even for me, man, being in this, a lot of youth pastors quit long before my age. They move on to something else.
Right.
And one of the advantages of being in it for a long time is I've been able to raise teenagers and still have in my home. And I can empathize with parents. Now, I remember being 21 and parents would ask me for parenting advice.
How do you know?
And they would ask me, and I would actually give them parenting advice. I don't know how many kids and families I screwed up back then. But yeah, to be able to say, oh, okay, hey, my own daughter has had anxiety and gone to counseling over here at our counseling center. And like, here's how we approach that. And we didn't just want them to like give her a pill to solve her problems, but we wanted somebody who really like listened to her. And when I talk to a parent on that level, they're just like, oh, like, man, it's just good to have tracks to run on. Cause so many times when you have teenagers, it's something brand new that you're just like, I don't know what I'm doing here. I need somebody else who's kind of been through this before me. So I think that's really helpful. Yeah. And I think just encouraging parents to keep that good relationship with their kids as much as they can. Man, that gets tough when you're disciplining and making rules and all that. And how do you not be a friend? I think as parents, we either err to like being their best friend or just the authoritarian. Yeah.
There's a balance and a balance to that. And it's a difficult place to hit.
Oh, it's so tough during those teenage years. Right. That's why we look like this, right?
Right.
So that's where they think it's white hair.
Not me.
Are you sure, Jeff? We're on video right now.
I don't know. It might have been me.
Well, Lauren is not here to defend herself.
Right. Yeah. You talk about those things, and like my therapist and I have talked a lot about finding areas of connection with your kids. And you mentioned, you're either the friend or the authoritarian, but regardless of what, you want to find somewhere in the middle. But the hardest, most frustrating, maybe not the hardest, but one of the more frustrating parts is you could be saying things till you're blue in the face, but just because it's coming from you, all of a sudden it lost its weight. Yep. I'm like, why? Why can your 12-year-old friend say the same thing and you act like that was the first time you've heard something so profound? And I've been screaming that at you. Yep. Not really, but so
that's part of being a parent.
No, it's awful.
Yeah.
It's awful.
That part's hard.
I would say that circles back to why I do what I do. Like our ministry, we've got about 35, 40 adults that my main job is actually to equip them to invest in students. And I just hear from parents all the time, including myself, where it's like, I've said that 1,000 times. And their youth leader says it one time and they come home and they're like, guess what I learned tonight, you know? Yeah. And as parents, it's just like, okay, I don't really care who gets the credit.
Yeah.
Even though I am true. Right.
Yeah.
But
that's very true.
It's just good to have as parents, other people coming alongside you in those years and like speaking truth into your kids too and smack them in the back of the head when they wouldn't listen when you would do that.
Right.
So
I want to kind of get into something. I know we're a little over here, but that to me is going to be an important part of this conversation. And in my household and for myself personally, don't subscribe necessarily to any specific religion or faith. I have my own beliefs or lack thereof, and my wife has her own beliefs in God and spirituality as well. And we, even before I was around, have allowed our daughters to sort of form their own decisions regarding faith and God and spirituality and that side of life. Our younger daughter leans more in the direction of, Christianity, even though she has struggled a lot too. While our oldest daughter's probably leans more toward, a lack of faith. And Mom and I had this conversation a little, maybe a couple months ago. And I'm interested, Brad, in your perspective on this. My fear is that while I believe we have created and fostered an intentionally open and honest environment or accepting household with regard to religion and faith, but we may have unintentionally, with the hope of allowing people to find themselves, we may have unintentionally removed some of the structure and the guidelines and the accountability and community that me and my wife have had growing up in the church. And
because both of you guys attended church
yes,
as children and young people.
Yes. And even though for myself, I speak for myself only, I do not still subscribe to those things. I know that I was set up in a way early on to where I had, when I was growing up, my what kept me out of trouble both was because I had good parenting. It was because I wasn't, I believe that I had a good head on my shoulders and made right decisions, but also because I had a fear of God.
Mm-hmm.
I had accountability in my youth pastor and youth leaders and, the interns and whoever was around. I had my other friends who were a part of that group that were maybe also trying to do and not do those things. So I guess what advice or I guess insight might you have for a family whose parents want to remain open-minded or don't share the same beliefs? And I've never once said that, God doesn't, and we won't get into this, that God doesn't exist. Never once said it, because who am I to say that, right? Because I don't believe that God doesn't exist. I don't know that I believe he exists the way that I was raised thinking he exists, but that doesn't matter. Whatever that looks like, how does a family stay open? Maybe they don't, but I guess what are your thoughts on all that crap I just spewed?
It's hard.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. You're talking about, religion, politics, and parenting. These are the things that's like you can really step on people's toes, right?
Yeah.
So I'll talk first about families of faith in our church, and some have approached it differently. Some are like, hey, by the time my kid's a high schooler, I want them to have full choice of what they do. I don't want to shove it down their throats. I've heard other ones who say, well, I still make my kid go to school and eat their vegetables and go to bed at a certain time and whatever. So like one of those other things is like, they're still going to go to church with us, And so even like church families differ on how they approach that. And I've seen both of those not go well. And I've seen both those work, too. So you're saying, hey, from a family who maybe doesn't have a faith background, how do they stay open to letting their kids explore and do stuff like that? Is that kind of what you're asking?
Yeah. And, yes.
Yeah, man, that's a tough question. I don't know that I'm the expert on that.
Yeah.
I think it's always easier to lead somebody somewhere that you're passionate about. Like I love Ohio State football.
Right. I agree with that.
By the way, I got a text. My phone's being used as a camera, but I got a text from someone named Larry Havorka that wanted to say like, go Buckeyes or something.
Yes.
Like that.
Yeah. That's my Ohio State right there. Okay. There you go. Good tie-in. And I've taught my kids that, I've kind of indoctrinated, even though we live in Nebraska, we're trying to hold strong, and whatever. But I think for me I'm not a Nebraska fan because I'm not a native here, but to be like, kids, you got to love Nebraska. And they're like, but Dad, like you're not loving Nebraska. Like, why would we, I think it just becomes a little more difficult, not impossible to do. It's easier to lead and tie that to faith. If you're passionate about that and that's really important, it's easier to like lead your kids through that. Yeah.
And so does it feel to a child or to a kid, if the parents don't have any real strong belief system in anything, does that leave the kids sort of flailing on their own? I mean, how do they know where to go or what to do? How do they navigate? Nothing.
Or is it is it whether I believe it probably would, and it would leave someone feeling a little bit lost.
Mm-hmm.
If there wasn't, I think it's still possible to have morality, and it's still possible to have a an accepting and loving and outlook, and having still kind of those rules of what's right and what's wrong and all that, without it being necessarily written in black and white in a religious text. I think it's possible to still have some of that structure, but
That's really hard. That's really hard, because I think it's even hard now with everything in the culture today. I don't know how your church handles those kinds of things, because I mean, now those things are obviously unbiblical. And so where I'm curious on how a youth pastor deals with that, because there's a lot of things that are going on in the society now, or in the kids' culture, that are truly against the writings in Scripture. So I'm just curious how everybody handles that. I'm so far removed from that. I don't have kids or teenagers or anything anymore. They're 40 years old.
Yeah.
So is that hard for you? Is that something that you have to deal with? And
yeah, absolutely. We try to, our church has taken the posture of like, we're going to talk about really difficult topics. Mm-hmm. Even though it can be uncomfortable, even though people might get mad, even though they might disagree, because we do feel like we gotta equip our students for, like, because they're going to hear the other side of the story 100 times a week.
Right.
So we feel like, well, if we really believe in another side, like, we should share that as well. But at the same time, like in our culture, one of the most offensive things you can do is like stand up and say, here's this absolute truth and everybody but this is wrong. So we want to hold to the teachings of Jesus in Scripture, and yet like show that we're like loving people, and that doesn't always come off that way.
And that kind of was the very beginning when he was talking about the commercial on the Olympics. Mm-hmm. I thought about that. It's like, yes, Jesus did hang out with all these people, of very non-judgmental of that, but he wanted to lead them to the truth. So, I mean, there was a reason for him hanging out, not just to hang out with them and party with all these people. He had a reason.
Right, but it also wasn't to, unfortunately for Christianity as a whole, he also wasn't going to them and going, you're wrong and you're disgusting for being wrong. And neither should any Christian. But they do. Yeah. I mean, and so anyway, I know that
we could get in a really deep.
Right. And that's not really what we're here to do. We're just, but anyway, those are the things that, and I would definitely be interested in, maybe off mic talking a little bit more about those sort of things, because to me, when we talk about that, if all of the teachings of the Bible and these things are real, would a child not be able to find that on their own and well, not necessarily on their own, but would there not be a way for that to still be a truth, whether or not their parents are doing it?
Yes.
And why would I could see myself saying, if I was with the girls, my girls, since they were born, I could see taking them to church and sort of like allowing that to be a part of their life, so that it's not just like, how would I expect them to even know that this is a thing and all of that if I'm not doing it and not exposing them to it? But at the same time, in that regard, to myself, this isn't going to resonate to you guys maybe as much, but that means I should also be taking them to a mosque, and I should also be taking them to,
letting them experience other religions.
Right. To make their own decisions on that. So is there a way for that to work? Am I making sense? Am I just kind of talking gobbly?
Yeah, it's tough. And as we talk about this, like, we could get into your guys' parenting style, and it's just like, we don't want to be critical of that or anything.
No, yeah.
I do think that it is hard for us. Kind of what I was saying earlier. It's hard for us as parents to like take our kids somewhere that we haven't been, because they're going to see through that. If I like say to my teenage son, dude, you got to be more patient, whatever. But like, I'm always
You're the least
impatient.
patient, yeah.
It's like, okay, Dad, you know?
Right.
But if he sees me, even if I'm failing and trying to wrestle through that and apologizing for that, I think that can be a great model, you know? But, and I think the same thing with church, man. If you guys as parents weren't totally bought into that, your kids would probably see through that and say,
right.
What's up with that? I do know some parents who are just like, I've heard stories of my parents never went to church, but they made sure I got on the bus to Sunday school every week. And so I was brought up in the church that way. And that worked for those kids too,
Yeah,
you know?
I suppose that's the thing. Yeah.
But
I had a couple more questions, but we're pretty well over.
Yeah. And I just want to say to you that I really respect what you do. I thank
me
you
too.
and appreciate
Absolutely.
what you do. And I just know that God will bless you through it and your family. And it's a hard one. I would not want to be in your shoes one moment.
Yeah. And that's to maybe round this out. That goes right back to what I was saying at the very beginning. There was a time in my life where I thought it would be awesome to be a youth pastor. And I think right now, despite, my own beliefs and things like that, I think that would be an awful job.
I think it would be terrifying.
But not awful. I think it probably would be very rewarding at times and very difficult at times, just like other jobs. And I hope you find enrichment in that. And I hope that your battery stays charged for that. Because one of the things I was going to talk to you about is how does Brad Mock stay in that mindset? How does he stay in that? How does he balance? If my world is being consumed by my kids, which I'm assuming yours has some consumption in your kids, you've got 4 of them and a wife and, your own family dynamic, not to mention hundreds, if not thousands of other families that are looking to you for those sort of things. We don't have to get into that unless you want to, and you've got a ton more time, but I hope that your battery stays charged and that whatever you're doing, you can keep doing that because these kids need you and others like you. And I am grateful for you. I know my wife is grateful for you. I know a lot of people that I love are grateful for you and a lot of people that I don't know. So thank you for doing what you're doing. And to the other people who might be listening to this, that either work alongside Brad or in the same type of work, whether it's youth pastor or not youth pastor or
any kind of pastor
or even any kind of youth worker of any sort. I mean, that is it can probably feel thankless. It can probably feel overwhelming. And I bet you more often than not, you're wanting to pull your hair out from time to time. But
what hair?
Yes, somebody needed to say that.
So unless you guys have anything else,
I'll talk about that for a minute.
I would love to hear how you balance that because we talked about the screen time and devices and having balance, and you have to have a balance in your life with what you do with your family and your wife separately, your family as a whole, and then the passion that you have for the kids here. So I'd like to hear just a little bit about how you do that because I know that has to be a discipline.
Yeah. I don't know the most recent stats, but for a lot of years, the stat thrown around youth ministry is the average youth pastor stays for like a year and a half at their church. And some of that's just because of the difficulties, some of the things you talked about. Some of it's because we are Mountain Dew drinking kind of young people at heart, and
go on to the
we
next
just burn bridges. Like we don't take the professional side of the job, and we kind of burn bridges at our job. The kids love us, but everybody else is annoyed by us, whatever. But how have I stayed for 24 years? There's been so many times where I've looked at my wife and we're just like, we're sitting on the couch and we're like, why are we still doing this again? And God just reminds us of like, hey, remember back in high school when like I asked you to do this? Has that changed? And that could change sometime, but has that changed? No, it hasn't. All right, well then let's keep doing it. So I think I keep holding on to that call of like, is this what I'm supposed to do with my life? Yes. Well then
you gotta
suck it up, put on your big boy pants and keep doing it. That's one. Maybe on a more practical note, I try to have a regular time every day where I just slow down and pray, meditate, get in scripture. And I don't do it every day, but just about every day where I just kind of time to get filled up.
Would you mind telling me a little bit about what that looks like for you? So, and the reason I ask that, because I plan to hopefully get into that with most of the experts that we talk to on this show, but also because I've recently been more intentional myself about taking some time every day to slow down and do some journaling and do things like that. So here's me asking for some advice. What does your slowdown, what does your, and you mentioned some of the things, but can you be a little bit more specific about how that looks just for you? And not that it's right, wrong, whatever, it's working for you, and what that routine looks like for you.
Yeah, I'll give my number one tip, and maybe this is just me because I'm a morning person, but unless I do it very first thing in the day, I don't get to it.
Me too.
And if I just say, hey, I'm gonna eat breakfast first today, or hey, I'm just gonna like read a little bit on ESPN.com today, that stuff is just more exciting or whatever in the moment. You know, you're just like, and then you never get back to it. Yeah. So my number one tip is like, I just carve that first thing in the day before I do anything else. And that helps me get to it more often than not. When I do that, I used to be a little more rigid about what I would do. And now that I'm more practiced in that, I can kind of free flow based on the day. If, you know, some days I may wake up and I'm just like, hey, I just want to be thankful for today, you know? And I'll try to talk to God in my head, sometimes out loud to help me stay on track. But what am I thankful for? You know, in the winter, it's typically the blanket because I get up first in the house and the heat, I crank up the heat, you know, and it's not warm yet. And I'm thankful that I have the heat. I'm thankful that I have the house. You know, you just try to be thankful for little stuff. Yeah. You guys have probably seen research on how gratefulness, how that impacts so many areas of your life. And then, just spending some time in prayer, just saying, hey, God, here's what's going on in my life, my ministry, my kids' lives. And would you take these burdens off my plate? And I give those to you. I mean, how freeing that is to do that. And then getting in the word. If as Christians, we really feel like the Bible is God's truth to us and his words to us, then let's get into it and see what how he wants me to live and who he wants me to be and stuff. So kind of centers around those few things.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for sharing.
Can I have one question?
Yeah, go.
The very beginning of our podcast, you said that a youth pastor asked you one question and it changed your life. Can you share that one with us?
Yeah.
I'd love to hear it.
Yeah. We were at Burger King in Howland, Ohio. You guys probably haven't been to that Burger King, I'm imagining.
No, I don't think so.
I'm embarrassed to even admit I went to Burger King, but
they used to have really good fries.
They did.
I used to go to let me pause you.
Yeah.
After coming to this church, I'd go to that Burger King every single time.
Oh my goodness.
With DJ and Andrew Hornacek. And,
oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah. Anyway, go ahead.
So we were there before school, and I was just starting to like grow in my Christianity, even though I had like grown up in the church. Like it was kind of like my parents' faith. I hadn't made it my own. And we're there in Burger King, and there's kids from my school coming in, and there was like a sense of embarrassment in me. I'm like, oh, I'm with my youth pastor. Like somebody's going to know, somebody's going to ask me like, who was that dude you were hanging out with? Oh yeah. It's like some guy from church or, you know, whatever. Like, anyway, so I was still at that point where I was just like a little embarrassed, nervous, but like at the same time he was cool and he was paying for food. So sure, I'll go. But the question he asked me was, hey Brad, what's it like to be a Christian in your high school? And why that was crazy was because I'd never put those two things together. Not that I was a crazy bad kid, but I'd never thought, how does my private faith life mix with my public life of who I am? And from that point on, I started to think like, if Jesus went to my school, how would he act? How would he treat people? Would he keep to himself? Would he be friendly? Would he be, you know, whatever? And so I just started to mix those worlds from that point on.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, and I'm glad he asked it.
Yeah.
I've asked that question
and
to
never
hundreds
left.
of students since then.
Yeah, I mean, and you've never forgotten.
No, pretty
really
life-changing. So
very cool.
Thanks for asking that.
Yeah,
brings
you're
back some
welcome.
good memories.
Yeah, good.
Well, Brad, I can't thank you enough for having us in your office. The sun was up when we got here, and now it's down. So thank you for spending some of your evening with us. And
thank your wife and family too for letting me go for.
Really appreciate
hours.
that.
You bet.
It's always a pleasure catching up with you. I don't know that you and I have ever had any kind of deeper conversations. So I think maybe we should do that again sometime. So I appreciate your friendship. I appreciate your heart. I thank you, Mom, for being
you're welcome,
here. And,
anytime.
So this has been an episode of Headspace, and by My Mama Done Told Me.
I have to put the table.
You could have waited till after my outro, Ma.
Oh, sorry.
If you want to connect with our family or give your opinions on the new segments in our show, or to Let us know what you think and give us opinions on what Brad has talked to Mom and I about tonight. I know how to get a hold of Brad, so if you have questions for him, I could always shoot him his direction as well. If you want to do that, though, you have to shoot us an email. And Mom, I'm going to ask you to tell him our email address, which is
www.
No.
Oh, no. Wrong one.
You don't have to put W's in front of your email address.
I forgot. My mama done told me podcast at gmail.com.
That's right.
There it is.
Yep. We also have all the social medias. Those are in our show notes.
Join noise.
We hope you keep your minds open and be kind to each other. Brad, tell everyone you love them.
Love you guys. Oh, I thought you meant like when I go home tonight.
Oh, yeah.
To the listeners, love you guys. And thank you too, man. You've encouraged me, man. And I appreciate that.
Much. Yeah.
And we appreciate your friendship
It
too,
is so
man.
nice to meet you.
All right, man. Love you guys. Bye. You guys ready?
Yep.
Yeah.
All right. How's my hair?
Looks good.
Lovely.
Thanks.
That was mine.
Always beautiful.
Lovely as well. Yeah. How's mine?
Yours is
dude,
great. His
always.
reminds me of Larry's.
Yeah. Short
My
and
husband's
cropped. Yeah.
Short and cropped. Yep.
Short
Doesn't
and cropped
take
and
any work.
balding.
Instead of a
Yeah.
little bit of a receding hairline. A
Yep.
little bit.
Test. Okay.